Hey folks, welcome back to PewTube. Got some new toys to play with today. What I want to talk about today is actually specific to film work. And it's actually about the cameras, but it's about the way that the cameras can work with the theatrical firearms. So one of the presents that I was lucky enough to get from my family members, extended family, over Christmas time was a GoPro. And I haven't really gotten to play with these before. So you saw a little bit of this footage in some of my Patty Crane Banff check-in videos. I got to play with these a little bit, both in the Theatrical Firearms workshop that I did up there and the gun disarms, as well as with some of the historical fencing. I ordered a couple of different rigs from Amazon. I had them sent up there. They only came like the last day of the workshop though, so I didn't get to play with them too much. And then I've gotten a couple other mounts since coming back, so I want to kind of talk about ways that we can use these to get specific shots when we're dealing with action movies, specifically involving firearms. So the typical mounts that you have, usually you've got your main options being like a head mount kind of thing. Let's see if I got these here. Here we go. And that could be a helmet mount kind of thing, or in this case, just basically like a little headlamp kind of deal, right? And the camera itself can just screw onto this. Get where'd my bolt go? There it is. Oh, it's still on my chest mount, that's why. And if you're not familiar with GoPro, they kind of have their own standardized little mount thing that has these little 2 slots on the camera mount that fit into the 3 slots on the other mount. Sometimes these use an Allen wrench, and sometimes it's just this little quick hand to tighten thing. So this is what I was using underneath a fencing mask. Didn't really work. I tried that with the historical fencing stuff. But you know, the nice thing about this, it looks where you look, it can to some degree see what you see. Now it's not actually eye level. This is a good couple of inches above the level of my eyes. The problem with that with theatrical firearms is that usually what we want is an actual POV, or at least a pseudo POV. And the problem is that if I'm bringing this up and sighting through a scope or through the sights, this is going to be both a little crooked and a little off to the side. Now you can crop things. You know, these default to a different aspect ratio than a lot of our movie cameras do. So you've got some wiggle room if you, especially if you're not too picky about high resolution, or you can try and, you know, get it a little bit crooked so it'll level out a little bit more when you're doing this. But it's still not going to be, you're not going to get that sight shot that you might be thinking of, where you're really looking down the red dot or over the rear sight and the front sight to your target. You're not going to exactly see where the gun is pointed. And also, you know, not everybody remembers to move their weapon with their head. And you get people who are doing this kind of stuff. It's a little different. This is a different experience, right? So these are certainly usable and useful, and frankly, you could probably hide one on a SWAT gear helmet, and nobody would really notice in your other shots most of the time when they're running up there. So that's one option. Another option that's fairly common is these chest rigs. So we get something like this, and it's a similar setup, you know, but at this time now we're putting it on our sort of center of mass, right where we're going to get shot at. Now this also has problems when we are using a firearm, because, you know, likewise it doesn't really see the same sight picture that we see. If you're using a handgun, it's doable. If you're using a rifle, it's doable. But the issue is that your support hand often is going to get in the way. Because if you look at where this actually sits, get this screwed in here. There we go. Right, so this is great if you just kind of want to see the same general direction that I'm seeing. But as soon as I start doing this, I am completely covering up this camera. You know, even if I decide, okay, I'm not going to use a sling, I'll have tangled up in my chest rig. Right, you've still got, especially your support hand, even if I scooch this off center and try and angle it so that it's not completely just looking at my buttstock, stop staring at my buttstock, it's still going to be a little bit off. And, you know, unless you're in a true complete isosceles, you're also going to often have a little bit of an angle to your torso. So that can also mess up the aim on these if it's really just latched to your chest. Most of these mounts, these GoPro mounts, are adjustable at an up and down angle and not at all on a side to side. So this is not like your standard video camera tripod mount where you might have like a ball head that's got a full 360 pivot, or a separate pan and tilt adjust or anything like that. These are a little bit more limited than that. I think the idea is usually that you would strap it to something on you and then you move your body as needed. The other one of the body mounts that came with this kit, I think I already put it away, was a wrist mount. And I had high hopes for that, to be able to actually look down and just strap it to my wrist and have a look at what I'm doing, either with a sword or with a firearm. But it goes the wrong way. So it really would only work if I like cut a hole in a shield or something, because it mounts the camera looking this way and not looking that way. And I guess I hadn't thought too much about that. Now I'm sure that I could rig up some kind of a 90-degree mount, something like that. It's not hard to find things like this that you can play with to find the basic camera mounts. And there's cheap stuff all over eBay and Amazon, whatever. But I didn't find any of the body mount systems that really read quite right in terms of getting that sort of first-person shooter or POV shot that wasn't an over-the-shoulder but could actually be mounted to your performer. So then the next obvious thing that you can try is mounting things to your Picatinny rail, same with all your other accessories that you might have for your firearms. And there's a couple of main options that I've seen for this, so I figured I'd try out a couple of those. The first one I want to talk about is this one. I think this cost all about maybe $10 on eBay, probably less, something like that. If you don't mind waiting, a month and a half for it to come from China, you can get them pretty darn cheap. What I like about this kind of mount, and there's a couple other things that use this type of mount, including the chest rig, is that it's got this ability for things to just clip in. And as long as enough other things using the same system, it's kind of like having a number of different things for your camera that use the same kind of tripod quick release plate. So that means you can switch back and forth between your sticks and your Steadicam rig and your whatever it else is that you want to mount it to. So this is a fairly easy way to pop these in and out, which can be nice. And it can go in basically either direction, which is nice. So I will give it points for that. The offset gives a nice option. Now my issues with this, I've got a couple. One is what keeps it from sliding in and out of the Picatinny. This is solid aluminum, so you can't really adjust these in and out to clamp it on. You have to start at the end of a rail and slide it, which means that you need to be able to get at the end of a rail. So if you have other things mounted, like a front sight post or a scope or something, you need to be able to take those off, everything off, to be able to get in at the far end and slide it all the way down, right? So not all Picatinny rails will let you do that very easily. This one here, I can't even go in through the back because of this mounting ring. I could go in through the front, but I can't go very far right now because I happen to have this other grip mounted here. I didn't even bolt that down, so I could probably move this if I was careful enough. Anyway, that's good enough. So anyway, it slides on, but it's a loose fit. Not so loose that you can just kind of snap it on the side, but loose enough that it's going to rattle around really obnoxiously, unless you use this little bolt here and cinch this down in between the ridges on the Picatinny rail. And this uses an Allen wrench, as so many of our firearms and camera accessories do. Oh, that's not even the right one. Where is it? It's this one. It's really getting to the point where to do anything with theatrical firearms or camera gear, you just have to have a couple of hex wrench sets with you, an English and a metric, because you never know what you're going to need. So you cinch it down, and then it's got a fairly stable platform. But this bolt, I foresee myself losing this pretty quickly, because in order to be able to slide the thing on and off, you have to take this bolt all the way out, which means you've got this tiny little headless bolt that's going to go flying somewhere, and you're going to lose it. It's, eventually that's going to happen. I just don't see any other way around that. But the nice thing about some of these mounts, these can mount either forward this way, so that it kind of sees what I see. And if I had it mounted back a little bit further, you'd get to see a little bit of the barrel and the muzzle as well. Or you can also mount it backwards, so that it is looking back at the shooter. Right, and if I'm doing it this way, then what I see is the perspective of the person who is wielding the firearm, which can also be a really interesting angle to get for some of your shots. It's not POV, but it is still subjective in the same way that a POV is. It's the reversal of the POV, right? So that can be an interesting option. If you're mounting it on the left side, looking back, you're going to have some issues depending on how you like to hold your rifle. If your support hand, if you're using an angled foregrip especially, or like a C-clamp grip, you're going to be in the way of that camera. If you've got a vertical foregrip like this, you're probably fine. You're going to be low enough. If you're just holding it down here or holding the mag well, depending on which one of these rifle grips you like, may or may not be okay for you. And like I said, you can mount this on either side. The other thing is that the GoPro aspect ratio is a lot closer to a square than the sort of widescreen thing that's become standard for all of our movies now on our devices. So what that means is you're probably going to be doing some cropping anyway. And it does mean that it's a little bit less of a deadly sin to mount some of these cameras in a way that they're going to be vertical. So it's not quite like vertical cell phone video where it's just really obvious that you don't know what you're doing and you're doing it wrong. But you can, if you want to, mount this way. Get this up here. I'll speed this up so you don't have to wait for me. All right, here we go. So yes, you can also mount it this way. You'll get this sort of vertical video thing, but again, you're going to be cropping it anyway, so it's not too big a deal. Most people aren't going to be shooting a whole lot like this unless you're doing like a hardcore Henry kind of thing, where the whole shtick of the movie is that it's all this sort of POV. But again, this can be mounted either forward or in the reverse, looking back at the shooter. It's not going to line up with the sights, but you will get some of that same sense of, you know, being able to see a little bit of scope, a little bit of sight post, a little bit of the shooter's face. Or in the other direction, you'll at least get to see your front sight post if you've got something like that, and a little bit of muzzle as you pan around. So this can mount to the top, it can mount to the bottom, it can mount to the side. So you have some flexibility, but you know, again, most modern rifles have enough crap on them that between your hand and maybe a tack light on one side, or a grip, or a scope, or things like that, you're kind of running out of real estate. So for something like this to be more useful, I do kind of wish that it had a little slider built in so that you could move it in or out just a couple of inches if you had to be able to line it up with a sight, or to be able to get it clear of the operator's hand if need be, or a sight post or something like that. That would be a nice addition that wouldn't take too much doing, and frankly, you know, I could modify this, I suppose, if I wanted to put the time in. It's not that hard to do a DIY kind of jobby on these, but these were cheap enough on eBay that I figured I'd give it a shot as was first. So this is one of our sets of options here, is this sort of offset mount. I'm totally going to lose this thing one of these days. Now it does have a little nylon peg in there, so at least it's not going to tear up your Picatinny rail too much, which is nice. Now the other style that I picked up is just a straight riser. It's basically like a set of scope mount rings for a scope that also attaches to a Picatinny rail. Now I had high hopes that this would let me get that true sighting down the scope kind of effect, because it really does mount straight up. This one at least comes with yet another, is it this hex wrench? Is that what this one's from? Yeah, there we go. Yet another hex wrench that you need to be able to put the mount on this one. Yeah, and this actually does not work with my standard handheld one from before, because it's a little too long. This one won't reach. Which means you do have to use the just hex head bolt that it comes with, or I'll swap that out for something else. So yet another thing you need a hex wrench for. So this one is plastic, it's not aluminum. It is kind of made to flex a little bit, for better or for worse. So if I take this other hex bolt out the bottom, you'll see that it's got these kind of ridges here. So what this means is, the good news is I don't necessarily have to start at the end and have an open section of rail and slide it all the way down. If I wanted to try and mount this in between this, you know, rear sight and the red dot, I can just kind of snap it in there. At least I could before. Let's see. There we go. Yep, it kind of clicks in. And then to keep it from sliding around, I can put that bolt back in if I need to, but at the moment at least, that's actually a pretty decent fit the way it is. But as you can see, this is centered and the GoPro lens isn't. The GoPro lens is actually offset. It's on the left side of the camera body, not in the center. So while this mount is completely centered, my lens is not. And so it still really doesn't give me that ability to look straight down the lens and see, to have the camera see what I would see, right? At least not without finding some way to cheat and offset everything else, which kind of defeats the purpose of using this quick and easy mount. So as with the others, this can go in either direction. You know, I could mount this looking back at me as well if I wanted to. I'd probably put it a little more forward if I'm doing it that way, right? So I could go down here and it would give me a view from here looking back. And I could try and cheat my face around such that I can see the lens through the red dot, which would sort of give the illusion that it's looking at me, looking at my target, even though I'm actually having to look diagonally and not straight down the barrel. If there is an operational red dot, that would kind of screw things a little bit. But because it's not going to change from where it is on the frame relative to the camera at all, it'd be really easy to add a red dot or a reticle or something in post-production because it's going to be in the exact same part of the screen. But, you know, if you're just not actually turning the red dot on, doesn't matter. So this is something that, you know, again, it could work. And as with the other type, I could mount it on the side. I could mount it on the bottom if I've got this quad rail, or if I've got into Keymod or M-Lock, I can just add some rail sections and slap this on. You know, I could put it on the bottom of a handgun if I want. Footage is so easy to flip, it really doesn't matter if these things are upside down or right side up. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But I have to say, in terms of the results, the footage you can get with these, I'm a little disappointed with the mounts. None of them really do what I would want them to do. They're certainly usable for some shots. You can get some interesting shots that way. I wouldn't do any of these for an extended shot anyway. And for a quick little bit of something just to show that the shooter is nervous or angry, or show the person jumping out at them or whatever, get the jump scare and a little bit of bang bang. Yeah, you could certainly get a shot like that. But then again, you can also just get a simple handle to stick it on, and most of the time I could probably line that shot up better if I just held my hand by the side and held the stick with the GoPro on it, and then I could kind of put it where I wanted it a little bit more easily. I don't think that would be any harder, frankly. Another option is that if you get one of those just grip stick kind of mounts, so you could probably find one. Excuse me. You could probably find one that's the same diameter as one of your scope mount rings, or a flashlight mount or something like that, or close enough that you can pad it up with some electrical tape and make it fit. And that also then gives you a way to mount it to a Picatinny rail or a M-Lock or quad rail or something like that. So there's a lot of options, and I'm not sure that these rail mounts are any better than any kind of DIY solution you're going to come up with, or just holding it or just taping it to something. I do think that the GoPro cameras have a lot of potential. There's some fun stuff you can do with those. And I'm looking forward to playing with mine a little bit more sometime. But there are some adjustments that are made. There's a learning curve. So for example, if I'm using the chest mount and I want it to look like POV, I can do that, but it means I'm not going to be shouldering this properly up here. I'm going to be shooting kind of down here and pretending this is my head, so that I can line it up with where it is on that chest rig and kind of shoot it from here, instead of shooting it from here where it's just going to see kind of magazine and a bunch of my hand and wrist. So there's adjustments that you need to make, and I'm sure they ended up having to do some of those with the Hardcore Henry, the POV action movie that they made. And really when you get into unarmed is where it gets especially complicated, because then you got to think about selling your hits not to an external camera person and not to yourself, but selling your hits to this camera. So that if I've got to cross that line between the camera and my opponent's face and look like I'm hitting them, I've got to find a way to make that happen at that weird angle, just to make it look like that punch is lining up. I don't know. It's a whole new frontier for me, and I'm looking forward to playing with it a little bit. And this gave me a bit of a taste of it. Gave you a little bit of a taste. I've thrown some footage over there, so now hopefully you get some idea of what some of that looks like. But if you have any experience with this, I'm curious to hear how it's gone for you, what's worked for you. As always, click subscribe, share, like, comment, email me, let me know what you think, and if there's other stuff you want to know about. But that would be this week's Pew 2. Until next time, stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you next time. This is Kevin Inoue from Fight Designer LLC. Thanks for watching.